I started as a student and then a staff member at the IU Auditorium, and uh, became the director of the auditorium, and now do that as well as work with university events. So one of my responsibilities is managing IU Event Services, which is an organization on campus that manages all of the event staff and event-related components of activities that take place in Assembly Hall. And so that is all of our ushers, ticket takers, parking, and security, as well as for non-athletic events, coordinating stagehands and dressing rooms and hospitality and all the things that take place and are necessary to support the event that's happening. I think the most unusual event that we had in Assembly Hall in my time was back in the 2008 campaign. In the series of about 15 days, we had President Clinton, Secretary Clinton, President Obama, as well as Dave Matthews coming in and doing a free show for 18,000 people on behalf of the Obama campaign. And so that run of events was particularly wild because we had all the other things that were typically happening at that time, all the end of semester activities, and we had just come off of the end of basketball season and headed into commencement. So it was a jam-packed time. Well, it's an amazing building in so many ways, but and for the guests, it's really a well-designed building. For those of us who put on events, there are some intricacies of doing that, and especially when you don't have time on your side. And so, with one loading dock, that is a ramp. That's an inside turn. So if you can imagine backing up a semi on your blind side and trying to get that into a loading ramp. That's definitely a challenge for even the most seasoned semi driver, and so that often takes a lot of time. But then also, as you have multiple events taking place within a series of a number of days, you have a lot of deliveries that are coming in and out, food and beverage deliveries, uniforms, and all kinds of stage gear, chairs and video equipment and so forth. And so getting all that coordinated is really tough with one loading dock, but we managed to get through it. You know, at the time that the building was built, the standard was that you had a loading dock, and so they put a loading dock in, and it worked well. And in the early life of Assembly Hall, there were numerous major rock shows that came in and out of that building without any problem. But as productions have grown, and the amount of equipment and the portability of equipment has continued to grow in the industry, we see that there are a lot more needs than what we actually have access for right now. To address that really would be a multi-million-dollar investment. And with the layout of the building and all of the other uses of the building, it would have been very difficult to find a way and absolutely unavoidable to spend millions of dollars to try to address the problem. So we figured out some ways that we work around that, and that's definitely more cost effective than trying to kind of retrofit the building with a state-of-the-art loading dock. So I mentioned the Dave Matthews and Tim Reynolds show. That was a huge success and a really fantastic night for the audience. But also at the inauguration of President McRobbie, we brought in Bob Dylan and Elvis Costello to put on a show that was one for the record books. And then everything else from Bush and Goo Goo Dolls to Lil Wayne, Macklemore, um, Smashing Pumpkins. So we've had a good run of shows in there over the last 20 years. Well, it was really unique because obviously we were celebrating a milestone in the university's life, and Mr. Dillon was very helpful in doing that and mentioned that from the stage, which is not something that he normally would do. But he was really intrigued about the new leadership at the university and excited to help celebrate that with all of the fans in the room. But then also just the fact that you have two iconic rock stars who have had bonded together, and Elvis did open the show, and then Dylan closed it. But then they came together to perform a couple of numbers at the end with one another. And in the room, John Mellencamp had come over to see the show. Legendary producer T-Bone Burnett was there, and it was just one of those nights where you were getting some of the very best of live music. No, he'd played several times. I think the last time was in 2002 or three, and we did a great show there that night. And the difficulty sometimes that we have in that space is the way it's configured for a rock show, and so. People who are seated in the balconies, especially the balcony corners, can really feel like they're a far ways off from the artist, and so it's hard for artists to connect sometimes. We've really revolutionized that with our use of video support during the event, and this was really before the era of people using video to support the concert. And so I think that's probably a old wives' tale. But certainly, as the person who promoted the show and worked really closely with him and his management team, I had never heard that. So, well, there are a couple things that play there. The first is that with professional venues coming online in Indianapolis and multiple venues that tours can play, you've got a much larger market base there. So it's a market of 1 million people versus a market of 100,000 people on our very best day in Bloomington. So there's that. There's also the demands of all the different teams that use that facility. And people tend to associate Assembly Hall with men's basketball, but it also serves as a home for women's basketball, for wrestling, and many of our other teams that use that building on a regular basis as part of their program. And so, finding those dates to make sure that we can accommodate what a show needs becomes a little bit more difficult. But it is something that we work on, and we've got great partners there that help us figure out when the building might be available to bring in a concert or an event. The other aspect that we have is with the touring industry the way it is. The tours are typically playing venues where they have some sort of alliance with not only the owner of the arena or the company that leases the arena on a long-term basis, but also with the promoter. And so tours typically will go to places where they've got those built-in relationships, and Assembly Hall continues to be an independently managed and operated building. So it's really that vertical integration of the music industry that's taken place where we have promoters who are serving as tour managers. They are either owning or leasing venues, and they're also managing the acts. And so you've got that kind of vertical integration, and so much as even we have some that own media outlets that advertise and promote those acts. And so it's a tighter knit business than it once was. The number one feedback item that we got before was there weren't enough restrooms, and nearly all public venues like Assembly Hall or theaters, amphitheaters, so forth deal with the same issue because there's a finite amount of time, whether it's an intermission or a halftime, that people have to get something to eat and get through the restroom, and so we always heard about that. Now with this renovation at Assembly Hall. There are nearly double the number of restrooms that we've had in the past, and so strangely, in the last few games, we have not had those complaints, and so people are finding those new amenities and making sure that they're taking advantage of them. Updated concession stands, and that was always one of the things. The concession stand lines were long, and the selection wasn't as robust as you might see at other venues. But with some retrofitting we've done there, there's a greater product offering and more service lines. So. Things like that are the main concerns that we heard from folks. The other one was, these seats aren't very comfortable anymore, and they were the original seats from 1971, and so the opportunity to go back and to replace all the seats, still in the same configuration, but really update them and give them a little bit more padding and a durable cover is definitely an improvement. I would say over the last handful of years, the university's made a great investment, obviously with this renovation, but also the new sound system that was put in now 3 years ago has really made the guest experience much more enjoyable. And so one of the biggest complaints we heard before that sound system went in was the intelligibility of the PA announcements and the quality of the music that backed up, the timeouts and so forth. And so we've got a state-of-the-art system in there now that has really helped. So right now, we're not saying that there are a lot of concerns. Obviously, it's a super steep building, and that's a very unique design element, but that plays into the home court advantage for us. And so that's something that I would never imagine that we would change because it really does help us when it comes to basketball. But and the addition of the handrails has really helped people feel a little bit more stable as they're heading down out of the entries to find their seat. At the time it was built, it certainly conformed to other types of buildings like Assembly Hall that were either municipal arenas or university arenas that hosted all types of events. The thing that I think leads people to the conclusion now that it's more of a basketball-only building is the floor configuration itself, which matches the basketball court. Most arenas that are built now have retractable bleachers or retractable seats from about the 15th row down to the floor. And so those can be pulled back and make more of a square area on the floor that's typically concrete, and the basketball court is usually portable. And so Assembly Hall was built so it really has that more of a rectangular floor feel. So it's about 80 feet across from hard seat to hard seat, not including the bleachers down on court level. And that is pretty unheard of in a modern designed arena. It'd probably be closer to 140 or 150. Wow. So almost double. So that gets you more of the square that you see in most arenas. And so those types of formats allow for greater flexibility in the type of events that you produce on the arena floor. And so there are things that we simply can't fit based on the configuration of the floor and the fact that we have those hard concrete walls that are the front of the seating concourse. Being the contact for the entertainment that comes to campus, I do know that we've had conversations before with the circus about coming here, and so the colleagues of mine who operate Feld Entertainment, which Ringling Brothers is one of their properties, have often inquired about getting back into that building. So if that was their feeling at the time, they've certainly gotten over it because they've always asked if they could come back. The problem with that type of program is with our closed ceiling, it's a unique design for a ceiling in an arena, and so it's difficult to rig a show like the circus. And then also the amount of time that it would take to get the circus in, build it, run it enough times that it was financially viable, and then take it out would be a longer window than we would typically have available as a string of days. There was a space down on court level for Zamboni and what they typically call an ice garage, and that space was roughed out, but was never actually done. And one of the things that comes into play if you have a floor that's capable of ice is you have a lot of issues then, and you have to have a portable basketball floor. And a long time ago, Indiana decided that it was a basketball state, and having a permanent basketball floor in Assembly Hall is a great advantage for playing because you don't have the dead spots and you don't have the changeovers, and so it makes that floor available for for our players to come in and shoot all the time and so forth. And so I think that was a calculated decision to not go in and try to put ice in. Ice is also extremely expensive to operate, and so unless you really have a robust program that requires it, it's probably a safe way to avoid a costly investment. In fact, colleagues of mine who manage arenas across the country have this issue all the time, and you'll notice when you watch a basketball telecast that oftentimes they'll stop play and go grab a towel or grab the mop and clean it up, especially when they've had a tight turnaround between an ice event, either a hockey game or a family show that's on the ice, and a basketball game, because there's not enough time to get the basketball floor acclimatized to the ice conditions, and so you get a lot of condensation. No, the design of the building was really done. The original design, I believe, was put together in '59, and then was not funded until the late '60s, and then built for completion in the early '70s, and so. Well, first of all, I'm a fan of that building. As a fan of basketball and a fan of going to events there, there's something special and unique about that building that we would never have been able to recapture in building a new arena. And so I'm excited about the renovation. I think that the investment that they made were really wise. They are fan-focused investments, so restrooms, concession stands, upgraded finishes, the new entry lobby, that's absolutely phenomenal, all the video assets. And the thing that I'm most proud of is the fact that we still continue to bring that history of the old part of the building into the new spaces. And so having the old state of Indiana floor with the eye in the north lobby, and having the old scoreboards displayed so prominently, as well as the opportunity to use all the video assets to recognize all these great teams and our Hall of Famers is really important. So I think that for a building that obviously has had a lot of memories made in it, and shows its age a little bit, we've really been able to get it into a place where it's still going to be a great place, service our fans, and be a great home for the events that we host there. So on a typical basketball game day, we work about 140 of our staff that people typically call the Redcoats, so those are our guest service folks, and then also usually an additional 75 or 80 security and parking people. So well over 200, and then we add law enforcement on top of that, and it's another 30 or 40, and so it's a huge crew. But there are a few people that have been extra special in the life of that building. There was a woman whose name was Martha, who worked in the balcony for many years in the student section, and she did not take any guff from anyone. And if you didn't raise your hands when our team was shooting a free throw, she would screech at you in a very raspy voice, "Get your hands up! Get your hands up!" And the students would say, "Oh my gosh!" And they'd get their hands up really fast before the free throw was shot. And then there was a gentleman named Doc Trissler, and Doc Trissler was an usher from the opening of the building. In fact, he started working over at Memorial Stadium, and then moved over and did Assembly Hall as well. And we lost Doc Trissler a couple of years ago, and he was one of the most special people in the kind of back behind the scenes life of Assembly Hall, because he made it his effort to meet every single person who worked in his section, get to know them, shake their hand, try to remember their name, and he always had a soft peppermint candy in his pocket, and would hand that out to kids or folks that he knew. And that was his way of making that huge arena a very small and personal place. And so that's something we've tried to learn from Doc and continue in all of our training with our staff, is making sure that we take those extra few minutes to get to know the fans and patrons, and make sure that they know we're there to assist them, and quite frankly, that they're among friends. Even our visiting team fans, who often may come in hoping to steal a win in Assembly Hall. We really try to go out of our way, as Doc did, to make sure that those people feel especially welcomed and give them a little Hoosier hospitality during their stay. You know, there have been a few, and many of the events that take place in Assembly Hall are not necessarily public events, but they may be a large group on campus or a private corporate event and so forth. And so I would say when we did the Cook celebration a few years ago, it was an amazing use of the building. It was a typical kind of entertainment and stage show, but the fact that we had transformed the entire building inside and out into a great celebration for their anniversary for 14,000 of their employees was unbelievable, and it was a 2-week undertaking, and everything from Assembly Hall to the Field House and all of the spaces that surround that outside with tents and so forth. That was a great one that always comes to mind. And then the other one that I would say is when we host the Boy Scouts for their national convention, which is periodic. We've had several of those visits now when that building is turned into a huge Boy Scout rally. And you want to talk about respectful and great young people coming in, but once they get in there and kind of feel the sense of that space and know the history and look at the banners and so forth, they go absolutely berserk. And so it is that's always one that's fun for us to work, and we appreciate the energy that they bring into the building. You know, it is such a unique building, both from the architecture standpoint and from the numerous events and memories that people have had there. Everything from graduating from high school or graduating from IU in that space to attending a Big Ten game or a major concert. Coming in and seeing the Rolling Stones there or whatever. There are so many things that trigger your experience. Pulling in, obviously, off of 17th Street into the parking lots, coming through the front doors and smelling the smell of popcorn and that kind of unmistakable smell of Assembly Hall, to knowing that you're likely to see former greats from the hardwood just sitting in the audience, soaking it in, to the fact that you look around and you see the community, whether that's our students, our current students, our alums, faculty, staff, townspeople from Bloomington. Everybody comes there for the sole purpose of having a shared experience, and Assembly Hall is a really remarkable place to do that because it is truly one of a kind.